There are green hydrogen initiatives, and just going into the details of the renewable energy now. So we have green hydrogen initiatives that the government has taken on. There is the energy efficiency programs that have been started. Smart grid is something that we hear, and also some of these, I just wanted to say that some of these will be dealt with in detail in the subsequent sessions. For example, we will look at the grid in the next session. So I'm only giving a very, very broad overview because bigger experts will get into the details of all this. There is electric mobility. We spoke about the transportation system, and EVs are possibly doing better than most other, if I can say that. There's green finance initiatives, carbon pricing, and CCUS. CCUS, of course, is extremely nascent in India compared to several other parts of the world, but that's still something that the government is at least thinking of. The government is on different paths and different speed across all of these, policy directions, if we may call it that. Just getting into very, very tiny details, I will not do the renewable energy targets because, Dr. Tami has already done that. But going into the green hydrogen initiatives, we do have a green hydrogen program. Very recently in January, we have the Green Hydrogen Enabling Measures Roadmap for Adoption in India earlier this month, which was released, and there's a lot of direction there. And I suppose that India will go down that road based on what is there in that document. The industry anticipates that from the upcoming budget, there would be direct subsidy schemes and capex support for green hydrogen initiatives. From the PSU, public sector undertaking side, we see IOCL, ONGC, GAIL, BPCL, NTPC, and of course private sector L&T, who are all spoken about trying to move away from conventional forms of energy to renewable or alternate forms of energy for their core operation. So you have IOCL speak about 10%, and of course all that keeps changing as technology changes. So that's something that's been happening, and in the private sector we see Adani Group and Reliance really putting in a lot of money towards green hydrogen. So that's happening on the one hand. The energy efficiency programs, of course, we have the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, and there are several programs under that. We also have the National Mission for Enhanced Energy Efficiency under the our National Action Plan as well. So we have several, electricity and energy side efficiency attempts being made. There is the smart grid, and I'm hoping that during the grid conversation we will have more details in that area. But really, it started in 2 phases. They extended it for the 3rd phase, and then there are, modernizing and microgrids, and how do you arrest distribution losses and things like that. So that's part of the smart grid, the direction. Green finance initiatives, I think this is something, this is still more nascent, much more new in India, but we see this is based on climate policy initiatives, research and reports. We see that between 2017 and 2020, there was an increase of 150% in green finance flows. However, it was really the public sector which was putting in these green, putting in this money. Domestic sources were much more than international sources. But I'd like to focus on the last 2 points here, which is climate mitigation and adaptation. And clean energy and energy efficiency are big. Transportation is still less. So what people speak about, mobility, about EVs, is really inadequate. There's not much really going into it. It's still very much the bullet trains. It's still very much the metros in our cities and things like that. Climate adaptation also is something we need to look at. Is that the major source for climate adaptation was 94%, and climate adaptation is really about dealing with the kind of climate severe events that happen when floods and the Himalayas are tumbling down. So 94% of climate adaptation is actually funded by the government and by the central and state governments. So this is just what I just presented earlier in pictorial form, which is private and public, but it's still largely public. But this is extremely important, I feel, and I'd like to focus on this, is that this is on climate adaptation, and we see that it's really government budgets which are paying for climate adaptation. And also we do see that it's the industry. I mean, we just saw now that it's the industry which is a large consumer of energy, which is also the large emitter. I think Dr. Vandana Shiva's presentation really spoke to this, that we are oil addicted or fossil fuel addicted. And it is, I mean, of course, there is NTPC and there are the government PSUs, but it is the industry which is really leading this addiction to fossil fuel. But somebody else is paying the price for the outcome of that addiction of fossil fuel. So if we have, dams being built on slopes where dams should not be built, and then there are, those slopes which are jeopardized, and there are landslides and villages were wiped away, then who's paying the price for that is actually public money. That's our money, which is then going into adaptation. So we see a slightly lopsidedness. I know it's a very quick presentation, but just want to only put in highlights here where we do see, and this is data which is telling us that adaptation measures are funded by the government, but so this whole thing of privatizing profits and socializing costs. This is just one more evidence, of that we see here, and something that we really do need to take note of. And this is directly an outcome of policy decisions, right? So that's the connect with policy. So while on the one hand we have, all these policies, but I think our issue with looking at policies is we look only in one side of the policy. If we have a policy which says green hydrogen or energy efficiency mechanisms, etc., then that's policy. But there are other policies as well which impact energy policy in different ways. So we do have the hard to abate sectors. We do have steel, cement, chemicals, petrochemicals, aviation, and all of these, heavy industries, fertilizers. We heard Dr. Shiva speaking this morning about, what's happening with fertilizers and what's the price that we're all paying for it. The textile industry and heavy duty transport. So energy, my submission here, I think the crux of what I would like to say here is that energy policy is not just policy which has the word energy in it or directly targets or directly addresses question of energy, but it's also these other industries which are energy dependent, which are energy consumptive, which are energy heavy, which also indirectly, influence how energy policies pan out. Inadvertently, possibly, right? So one's not questioning intention, perhaps, being kind, but one can't also look at energy without looking at other allied policies, other allied sectors, which are also determining how those energy policies get determined and who determines those energy policies. So when we have a Reliance Industry Limited or even an IOCL saying that we would like to shift to green energy, but you're burning fossil fuels, you're burning oil at the end of the day. So how green can that get? So my submission is, can we in these 2 days have a slightly broader mind and look at energy not on this narrow path of electricity or this narrow path of thermal energy or nuclear energy, but also see what is this other, because I work on, oil, gas. I'll speak a little more on that and end there, is that, we very proudly today say that 80% of our refineries are integrated for producing petrol and other petroleum products like petrochemicals. That is an energy policy in action. It's not coming out of your, traditional departments, right? It's coming from the Department of Chemicals and Fertilizers, where the DC, within which you have the chemicals and petrochemicals department, which determines that India wants to be a petrochemical hub. We today are diverting about 7% of oil that we use, that we are refining from petrol, but we use 7% for materials, which is petrochemicals. But the intention is to go from 7% to 25% because the consumption of oil for petrol is going to reduce with EV and with renewable energy. And so is this then an energy policy or not, right? So you're shifting oil from petroleum or petrol to petrochemicals. What are those petrochemicals going to do? They are going to bring in far more unsustainable ways of living in terms of course, all plastics are not unsustainable. We understand that. There's the question of essential and non-essential. There's the question of single use and multiple use. There is the question of fertilizers, but fertilizers are made from ammonia. That's natural gas. So are these all not then as much influencing the use of energy, the emissions that we have. So I'll end with this slightly unconventional presentation on energy policy, which was supposed to have looked at what India is doing in terms of energy policy, but really a little bit of a twist to say that energy policy is not just the energy, the traditional, conventional view, but really we'll have to look at these 10, 12 big industrial sectors, which are also consuming, the largest consumers of that energy, and there is a double emission over there, because it's not just emission because of the energy that they're using in their products, but also the production of fertilizers, for example, or the production of petrochemicals, for example, which adds another layer of emissions. So you actually have two levels of emissions that we would have to actually calculate and factor in. And so, I'm possibly not as upbeat about what we've achieved. On some things, yeah, sure, maybe renewables on some point we might have. But when we look at this broader picture, then I think we have a lot more road to travel than we think we have. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry if I've exceeded time.